Mace Windu watched Jango Fett die defending Count Dooku, the leader of the Separatists, and then went home and kept using an army cloned from that man's DNA. Did no one think that was strange? Because here's what kills me. That wasn't classified intel. It wasn't some buried footnote in a restricted Jedi Archive file. Mace was standing right there. He's the one who took Jango's head off, in the arena, on Geonosis, while Jango was fighting for the other side. And then Mace dusted himself off, hopped on a gunship crewed by men who share that dead bounty hunter's face, and apparently never once said, "Hey, should we maybe talk about this?" Nobody talked about it. So let's talk about it. This is a prosecution. Not of Palpatine. That guy won, we know. Good for him. This is a prosecution of the Jedi Council, the most force-sensitive, supposedly wisest governing body in the galaxy, who had every single piece of evidence they needed to stop Order 66 before it ever happened, and instead chose to do absolutely nothing with any of it. And the smoking gun, the place where every thread of this conspiracy physically lived, grew, and waited, was a single ocean planet beyond the galaxy called Kamino. Think of the Clone Wars as a chess game. Player 1 is Palpatine. Player 2 is also Palpatine. He's playing both sides of the board. He controls the Separatists through Count Dooku. He controls the Republic as Supreme Chancellor. He built the army that fights the war, and he built the enemy that army fights against. Every battle, every crisis, every desperate vote in the Senate, all of it runs through one man sitting in a red office on Coruscant, making concerned faces. And the Jedi? The Jedi aren't even playing. They're the pieces. But this game wasn't invisible. It was sloppy. Palpatine left fingerprints everywhere. And the biggest, most undeniable fingerprint was sitting on Kamino for 10 straight years, growing in sterile white chambers above an endless ocean, waiting for someone to come looking. Nobody came looking. Let's start at the beginning. 32 BBY, the invasion of Naboo. A Trade Federation fleet blockades a minor mid-rim planet on orders from a holographic figure they know only as Darth Sidious. The crisis destroys the credibility of Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum. The senator from Naboo, a man named Sheev Palpatine, rides the sympathy vote to the chancellorship. He engineered the invasion of his own planet to get a promotion. Player 1 makes the opening move. Player 2 provides the justification. And the Jedi? Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan handle the ground conflict, defeated a Sith apprentice named Darth Maul, and accept the new Chancellor's warm congratulations, without ever asking why the senator who benefited most from the crisis happened to come from the exact planet that was invaded. Fine, that's subtle. Political maneuvering, plausible deniability, I'll give them that one. But here's where it stops being subtle. And here's where Kamino enters the story, though the Jedi wouldn't know that for another decade. Around that same time, a Jedi Master named Sifo-Dyas did something nobody authorized. Sifo-Dyas had been on the Jedi Council. He'd been having visions of a coming galactic war, dark premonitions of a conflict so massive the Republic would need a standing army to survive it. He told the Council. The Council thought he was being alarmist, that his proposals were incompatible with the Jedi's role as peacekeepers. They removed him from the Council entirely. So Sifo-Dyas, acting completely alone and without Jedi approval, contacted the cloners on Kamino and placed an order for a clone army in the name of the Jedi Order. This is the moment Kamino became the most important planet in the galaxy. Not because anyone noticed, because nobody did. What happened next requires precision, because the timeline matters. After Palpatine secured the chancellorship, after Valorum was already gone, Sifo-Dyas was dispatched on a mission to Obadiah. There, the Pike Syndicate murdered him. Not randomly. On orders from a man operating under the name Tyrannus. Tyrannus was Count Dooku's Sith identity. Palpatine's newly recruited apprentice killed the Jedi who started the Clone Army project, then hijacked the project entirely. Dooku didn't cancel the order on Kamino. He took it over. He selected the genetic template, a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Jango Fett. He oversaw the insertion of behavioral modification biochips into every single clone. Chips containing pre-programmed combat directives, including one designated Order 66, which would compel every clone trooper to execute their Jedi commanders upon activation. So the army growing on Kamino was commissioned by a murdered Jedi, hijacked by a Sith Lord, modeled on an enemy combatant, and implanted with a kill switch. It was designed from the molecular level up to destroy the Jedi Order. And it sat there, in those white Kaminoan facilities, 200,000 units and more on the way, for a full decade. The Jedi Council knew it.So was dead. They knew he'd been removed from the Council before his death. They did not know, because they did not investigate with any urgency, the circumstances of his murder, his contact with Kamino, or the fact that a Sith Lord had taken over his project. For 10 years, the murder weapon grew in secret, and the people it was designed to kill never thought to ask what their dead colleague had been doing before he died. That's not a gap in intelligence. That's institutional negligence on a galactic scale. Now we get to 22 BBY, and this is where Kamino stops being a secret and starts being the most obvious red flag in the history of red flags. Obi-Wan Kenobi, tracking an assassin who'd targeted Senator Padme Amidala, traced a toxic saber dart to Kamino. He went to the Jedi Archives to look up the planet. It wasn't there. Kamino had been erased from the archives entirely, deleted. A whole planet, gone from the most comprehensive knowledge repository in the galaxy. Someone with access to the Jedi Temple's most restricted systems had deliberately concealed Kamino's existence. Not some random data corruption, surgical removal. And here's the part that should make your eye twitch. Jocasta Nu, the head archivist, confirmed the entry was simply missing and offered the genuinely unhinged assessment that, if it's not in the archives, it doesn't exist. The head librarian of the galaxy's greatest library just shrugged at a missing planet. Nobody launched a security investigation. Nobody asked who had access to delete records. Nobody treated it as evidence of infiltration. Obi-Wan found Kamino anyway, because he's competent, even if his institution isn't. And what he discovered there should have ended the war before it started. He landed on a world of endless rain and towering white facilities, where Kaminoan Prime Minister Lama Su greeted him warmly, as though they'd been expecting a Jedi representative for years. Because they had been. The Kaminoans believed the Republic had commissioned this army. They believed it.So had acted with full Jedi authority. They had been growing hundreds of thousands of clone troopers in good faith, wondering when someone would come to pick them up. The sheer cheerfulness of the Kaminoans is somehow the most unsettling part of this whole conspiracy. They had no idea they were building a weapon of genocide. They thought it was a government contract. Obi-Wan discovered the army. He discovered the genetic template was Jango Fett, who was living on Kamino at that moment with his unaltered clone son, Boba. He reported all of this to the Jedi Council. Then he followed Jango from Kamino to Geonosis, and on Geonosis, Obi-Wan found Jango Fett operating in Count Dooku's inner circle. The clone template, the man whose DNA was the foundation of this mysterious army that just appeared gift-wrapped for the Republic, was working for the leader of the Separatists. Obi-Wan reported this too. So let's take stock of what the Jedi Council now knows. A secret army exists on Kamino. It was built from the DNA of a man who works for their enemy. It was ordered by a dead Jedi who had no authorization. And the planet where it was built had been deliberately hidden from their records. 4 facts, each one a red flag. Together, they're a bonfire. The Council's response? Deploy the army immediately. But wait, before any of this turned into a battle, Dooku sat down with a captured Obi-Wan on Geonosis and said it out loud. Just told him. A Sith Lord named Darth Sidious has gained control of the Galactic Senate. Those words. To a Jedi Master's face. A former Jedi who trained under Yoda, one of the Lost 20, only the 20th Jedi in the Order's history to voluntarily leave, laid the entire conspiracy bare in a single sentence. Obi-Wan relayed this to the Council. Mace and Yoda discussed it. Their conclusion? Dooku was lying. Classic Sith disinformation, trying to sow distrust. And look, I get the instinct. You don't take career advice from the guy trying to kill you. But Dooku's claim was testable. That's what makes this indefensible. Investigate. Run a quiet background check on senior Republic officials. If Dooku's wrong, great. You've confirmed your Chancellor's clean, and you can proceed with full confidence. If he's right, even partially, you've saved the galaxy. The cost of checking is time. The cost of not checking was the destruction of the Jedi Order. The Council chose not to check. Then the Battle of Geonosis erupted. Mace cut Jango's head off while Jango was literally defending Dooku's operation. And back on Coruscant, Representative Jar Jar Binks, serving as interim senator of Naboo in Padme's absence, proposed a motion to grant Palpatine emergency executive powers. The Senate said yes. With those powers, Palpatine authorized the deployment of the clone army waiting on Kamino. Both armies in this brand new war now answer to the same guy. Player 1 got his war machine. Player 2, also Palpatine, gave him something to use it on. No canonical record exists of any Jedi Council member formally objecting to the adoption of the clone army on the basis of the Jango Dooku connection. No independent audit of the clone's biological programming was ordered. No forensic investigation into who funded the Kaminoan project was initiated. The army was needed. The army was available. Kamino was delivering soldiers, and the questions could wait. They waited for 3 years. By the time anyone tried to answer them, it was too late. Now, I know what the lore experts are thinking. And you're right, we need to address this properly, because the prosecution doesn't hold up if we ignore the strongest defense. The dark side clouds everything. That's the canonical defense of the Jedi, and it's not nothing. Yoda says it explicitly in Attack of the Clones. Their ability to use the Force has diminished. Mace echoes it. And, canonically, there's a real mechanism behind it. Beneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the literal building where the Council held their meetings and made every one of these decisions, sat an ancient Sith shrine. The Jedi had built their temple on top of it centuries earlier, believing they could neutralize its dark side influence. They couldn't. That shrine, combined with Sith rituals designed to create what's called the Shroud of the Dark Side, actively interfered with Jedi precognition and Force perception throughout the entire Clone Wars era. Palpatine was, in a real and canonical sense, jamming their radar from directly underneath their feet. I'll grant that. Completely. The Jedi couldn't sense Palpatine's true nature through the Force. Their visions were clouded. Their instincts were dulled. That's canon. That's real. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. It does. But here's the thing, and this is the part that breaks the defense wide open. You don't need the Force to read a report. You don't need precognition to notice that the clone template worked for your enemy. You don't need mystical visions to investigate a dead colleague's suspicious military order. You don't need Force sensitivity to follow up when a former Jedi tells you, to your face, that a Sith Lord controls the Senate. You definitely don't need the Force to ask why a planet was deleted from your own archives. Every single red flag in this prosecution is based on physical evidence, investigative logic, and information that was literally handed to the Council in briefings they attended. The dark side clouding explains why they couldn't feel Palpatine in the Force. It does not, cannot, explain why they couldn't think. The evidence wasn't in the Force. It was on paper. It was in Obi-Wan's mission reports. It was on Kamino, staring at them with a million identical faces. And thinking, basic, connect the dots, follow the money thinking, is what failed them most catastrophically in the final years of the war. Because the conspiracy wasn't just hiding in plain sight. It was being bankrolled in plain sight too. The intergalactic banking clan, led by Sandhill, was a key member of the Separatist Council, openly allied with Dooku, openly at war with the Republic. During the Clone Wars, the banking clan was simultaneously financing both sides of the conflict. Republic Senator Rush Clovis uncovered corruption within the banking clan that showed credits flowing in directions that should have raised alarms across the Senate and the Jedi Council both. the financial infrastructure that kept Kamino's cloning facilities running, that paid for the growth acceleration and the training and the equipment. Where did the Jedi think that money came from? A dead Jedi savings account? The funding trail for the clone army was another thread that, if pulled, would have unraveled everything. Nobody pulled it, because pulling it meant questioning the army, and questioning the army meant questioning the war. And that's the institutional trap that made all of this work. The Clone Wars lasted 3 years, and during that time, the Jedi Order underwent a transformation that made every subsequent failure structurally inevitable. They were supposed to be peacekeepers, guardians, mediators. Their authority came from their independence, from standing apart from political and military structures. From the first day of the war, they abandoned that identity entirely. They became generals in the Grand Army of the Republic, commanding clone troopers in combat operations across hundreds of worlds, answering to a military hierarchy that terminated at Palpatine's desk. Palpatine didn't just hide the conspiracy from the Jedi, he made the Jedi dependent on it. By embedding them in the military command structure, he ensured that questioning the clone army's origins, questioning Kamino, wasn't just an intellectual exercise, it was an institutional threat. If the clones couldn't be trusted, the Jedi had no army. If they had no army, they couldn't fight the war. If they couldn't fight the war, they were failing in the role the Republic had come to depend on them to fill. Every uncomfortable question about Sifo-Dyas, about Jango, about Kamino, led to the same catastrophic implication. The Jedi's entire wartime function might be built on a foundation laid by their enemy. And no institution finds it easy to investigate a question whose answer might erase its reason for existing. Yoda sensed this. In moments of reflection throughout the series, he voiced unease about what the Jedi were becoming. Mace Windu expressed private concern about Palpatine's expanding power during council deliberations. Senators Padme Amidala and Bail Organa warned repeatedly that the Republic was dismantling its own democratic institutions in the name of security. But concern without action is indistinguishable from acquiescence. They noted the approaching storm and didn't move indoors. Meanwhile, Palpatine was conducting a sustained, private campaign to cultivate Anakin Skywalker. Over the course of the war, Palpatine met with Anakin frequently, outside Jedi oversight, offering counsel that consistently undermined the Council's teachings. He encouraged Anakin's resentment. He validated the emotional attachments the Jedi Code forbade. He took Anakin to the galaxy's opera house and told him, unprompted, the legend of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord who could manipulate life and death. Just casually dropped a Sith origin story into conversation like it was small talk. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Who asks that? Who brings that up at the opera? The Council knew about this relationship. They were actively concerned about it. They didn't terminate it. They didn't restrict Anakin's access. Instead, they tried to exploit it, asking Anakin to spy on Palpatine, a decision that pushed him closer to the Chancellor's orbit and further from their own. And the man's office. Look at his office. Statues of the 4 sages of Dwartii, figures with documented connections to the dark side, deep crimson everywhere. His name is Sheev Palpatine. It sounds like someone tried to name a villain and gave up halfway through. But the comedy ends here. Because in the final years of the war, the conspiracy behind Kamino didn't just sit there waiting to be found. It was found. By a clone. Clone Trooper CT-5385, designated TUP, during combat on the planet Ringo Vinda, experienced a catastrophic chip malfunction. Without warning or comprehensible motive, he turned and killed Jedi General Tiplar in the middle of a battle. Afterward, Tup displayed symptoms of severe disorientation, repeating one phrase like a broken recording. Good soldiers follow orders. The Kaminoans explain this away as a defective behavioral modification chip, supposedly a safeguard against aggressive tendencies inherited from Jango's genetic profile. Just a quality control issue, nothing to see. ARC Trooper, Fives didn't buy it. CT-5555, 500 1st Legion veteran. The man who did what the entire Jedi Council wouldn't. Fives investigated the chips, examined Tup's malfunction, and pieced together the truth. These weren't behavioral moderators. They were pre-programmed kill orders. Every clone in the Grand Army had one embedded in their brain. And one specific protocol, Order 66, would turn every single trooper against their Jedi commanders the moment someone spoke the words. Fives had found the kill switch. A clone trooper, an individual engineered to follow orders without question, grown on Kamino in those same sterile white chambers, had shown more investigative courage than the wisest Force users in the galaxy managed in 3 years of war. Fives tried to warn Anakin Skywalker and Captain Rex. Palpatine, who'd been monitoring this from the moment Tup's malfunction threatened exposure, intervened directly. Through manipulation of the medical inquiry and strategic framing, Fives was made to appear unstable, dangerous, delusional. Cornered by clone troopers acting under containment orders, Fives was shot and killed by Commander Fox before he could fully deliver his warning. He died on the floor trying to save the people who were supposed to be saving the galaxy. The Jedi Council accepted the Kaminoan cover story. The chips were safeguards. The malfunction was isolated. Investigation closed. A man had died holding the key to the Jedi's survival, and the Order let that key fall to the floor and walked away from it. The 501st journal narration from the old Battlefront 2 campaign hits different knowing all this. Those clones reflecting on the march into the Jedi Temple, knowing what was coming. What I remember about the rise of the Empire is how quiet it was. Yeah, quiet because everyone who tried to scream got silenced. Separately, in that final year, the Jedi did finally launch a proper investigation into Sifo Dyas's death and the origins of the clone army. Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin traveled to Obadiah and discovered that the Pike Syndicate killed Sifo Dyas on orders from Tyrannus, Dooku's Sith name. They established a direct, documented link between Count Dooku and the creation of the army on Kamino. The connection between the clones and the Sith was no longer circumstantial. It was proven. And still, they kept using the army. They kept trusting the clones. They kept fighting the war. Because by that point, what else could they do? They'd walked so far into the trap that turning around meant admitting they'd been walking the wrong direction for 3 years. That every battle, every sacrifice, every Jedi who died commanding clone troopers had done so as an unwitting participant in a Sith Lord's game. So when Order 66 came, when Palpatine spoke those 2 words and every clone trooper in the galaxy turned their weapons on their Jedi commanders, it wasn't a twist. It was the last move in a game that had been over since the opening. The murder weapon was built on Kamino. The ammunition was grown there. The kill switch was installed there. The template was provided by the enemy. The Order was placed by a dead man and hijacked by a Sith. The planet itself was erased from the records to buy time. And when a clone trooper actually found the kill switch and tried to rip it out, the Jedi let his warning get buried under Kaminoan bureaucratic doublespeak. But the story of Kamino doesn't end with Order 66, and this epilogue might be the most telling part of all. After the Republic fell and the Empire rose, Kamino kept producing clones for a time. The facilities churned on, but the Empire, Palpatine's empire, eventually turned on Kamino itself. The cloning facilities that had built the Grand Army of the Republic became a liability. The Empire transitioned to recruited stormtroopers, conscripts, humans who hadn't been engineered with the genetic memory of a Mandalorian bounty hunter. Kamino's usefulness expired. And when a group of Kaminoan loyalists attempted to rebel against Imperial authority, when the cloners who'd built the weapon tried to assert independence, the Empire sent forces to shut them down. Imperial bombardment hammered Tipoca City, the very facility where the clone army had been grown. Think about that. Palpatine destroyed the factory after the product had served its purpose. He didn't just use Kamino, he used it up. The ocean planet that the Jedi never thought to question, that held every secret of the conspiracy in its cloning vats and databanks, was ultimately discarded by the same man who'd exploited it. Kamino was a tool, and when the tool was no longer needed, it was broken so nobody else could use it. The cover-up extended beyond Order 66. Palpatine didn't just kill the Jedi with Kamino's clones. He tried to bury the evidence by destroying the source. Every piece of the puzzle was on the table. Kamino was the table. Order 66 wasn't something that happened to the Jedi. It was something they walked into, one ignored red flag at a time, because they were so confident in their own wisdom that they couldn't conceive of being outplayed by a man named Sheev. Palpatine didn't need to be a genius. He just needed the Jedi to be exactly who they were. An institution that trusted the Force more than evidence, tradition more than investigation, and their own judgment more than a dying clone's warning. And that's why the Clone Wars is the best era in Star Wars. Not despite the tragedy, because of it. Every heartbreak was foreshadowed. Every betrayal was earned. The fall of the Jedi wasn't a plot twist. It was a slow-motion catastrophe that everyone saw coming. Every clue lived on one rainy planet beyond the galaxy, growing in white chambers, waiting. Everyone saw it coming, except the Jedi. Subscribe for more stories like this.